Okay, most of you have mentioned about that payment, right? That means most of you have mentioned the softwares which are available without any cost is mean by free software, right? So let's see what really free software is. And another comment is also there, software that gives the right for the users to copy, change, use, and software for free, right? So it is very close to what we are going to talk today, Shwada. Okay, now this is your lecture material, and what we are going to cover today is we are going to discuss the basic concepts about free and open source software solutions, right? So this is what we mean by free software, and the definition is given by Richard Stallman. And Richard Stallman is the founder of Free Software Foundation, and he says free software is a matter of liberty, not price, and it upholds four essential freedoms. That means, and when I asked you the question free software, what is free software? Most of you have mentioned that software comes without any fee, uh, means by free software, right? So we understand the term free software like that usually, right? So we mistakenly understand free software means the software that do not have any cost, but it is different, right? Based on this statement, the free software is usually referred to satisfying four of these freedoms, right? And even if the term has free, even if this free software has a term free, this does not belong to anything related to cost, right? So here we don't have anything related to cost. We only talk about freedom, uh, what we can have when we use that software. According to Richard Stallman, he says that there are four essential freedoms that any free software should satisfy. Freedom 0 means the freedom to run the program as you wish for any purpose. And freedom 1 is the freedom to study how the program works and change it. And therefore, you can do your computing as you wish. And freedom 2 is the freedom to redistribute copies so that you can help others. And the last one is freedom to distribute copies of your modified versions to others, right? So here I have mentioned in bold some of the important things that you have to remember. There are four essential freedoms. Here we have mentioned it as the freedom 0, 1, 2, and 3. And if it is a free software, if any software is called as to be free software, then it should have freedom to run, and it should have freedom to study and change it, and it should provide freedom to redistribute copies, and also it should provide freedom to redistribute the copies of your modified version. This means you can modify the code and then redistribute the copy, right? So other than just saying what are these freedoms by myself, let's see a small video, then it will be very clear to you. And this video is by Richard Stallman, right?
Free software is the first battle in the liberation of cyberspace. Who controls your computer? Is it you? Or is it some big company that's really controlling it? Well, what is a computer? A computer is a universal machine. It will do any computation you want it to because you give it a program that says what the computation is that you want. So the computer only knows how to get out an instruction and do it, and get out another instruction and do it. The program has the instructions. It says what to do. So by writing the right program, you can make it do anything. Well, almost anything. So who gives the instructions to your computer? You might think it's obeying your instructions when really it's obeying somebody else first, and you, only as much as that company wants it to, will let it listen to you. With software, there are two possibilities. Either the users control the program or the program controls the users. It's inevitably one or the other. So in order for the users to control the program, they need the 4 essential freedoms. And that's the definition of free software. Free software respects the user's freedom and community. Now, we often call it libre, using the French or Spanish word, pronounce it as you like. The point is, that's what we mean. We don't mean it's gratis. We're not talking about price. We're concerned with your freedom, and we sometimes say free/libre to show that. So, freedom 0 is the freedom to run the program as you wish for whatever purpose. Freedom 1 is the freedom to study the source code of the program and change it so it does the computing you want it to do. But what is the source code? Well, every program typically will have 2 forms. There's the form that you can read and you can understand if you know the programming language. That's the source. That's what programmers write and change. Then there's the executable, which is a bunch of numbers which even a programmer can't figure out. If all you get is the executable, it's a horrible pain in the neck to figure out what it does, and even harder to change it. So to give you the real possibility to study and change it, they've got to give you the source code. That's a requirement. Well, with those 2 freedoms, each user separately can make a copy and start changing it and make it do what she wants. That's individual control. But what if you're not a programmer? You look at the source code and you don't understand it. Individual control isn't enough. We also need collective control, which means any group of users are free to work together to adapt the program to what they want. Of course, in the group, some of them are programmers. They're the ones who actually write the changes, but they're doing it as part of the group for what the group wants. Of course, the group doesn't have to be everybody. So others can use it some other way. They're all free to do that. So collective control requires 2 more essential freedoms. Freedom 2 is the freedom to redistribute exact copies, to make the copies and then give them away or sell them when you wish. And freedom 3 is similar, but it's for your modified versions. You're free to make copies and then give them or sell them when you wish. So if you do have these freedoms, then it's free software. The users control the program. But if any of those freedoms is missing, then the users don't control the program. Instead, the program controls the users, and the developer controls the program. So that means this program is an instrument of unjust power for its developer over the users. That means the users don't have freedom. That's non-free proprietary software, which we got to get rid of. Well, when you've got proprietary software, what happens? Sometimes the program snoops on the user. Sometimes it tracks the user. Sometimes it restricts the user and stops users from doing what they want to do. You can see that the blue ray is your enemy. Sometimes the software remotely deletes books, as Amazon did with 1984. Sometimes the developer compels users to install a harmful upgrade by threatening to take away other functionality if it's not installed, as Sony did. And sometimes they can even forcibly change the software at a distance, as Microsoft can with Windows through the universal backdoor. So sometimes they even sabotage users, as Microsoft does when it tells the NSA about bugs in Windows so it can use them to attack people's computers. Well, what you get is basically with proprietary software, the owner has power over the users and takes advantage of this power, putting in those various malicious functionalities to hurt the users. Of course, they don't do this because they're sadists. They're doing it just for money, for greed. They have various ways that they can profit from having this power over users, which does not make it even the tiniest bit less evil. But they have no shame about it. They have conferences where they talk about the latest ways they can take advantage of users through the power they have. Basically, proprietary software, which is now from almost all the users of proprietary software, they're using proprietary malware. It's software for suckers. So how do you stop being the victim? Formerly, you had to stop using computers, but not anymore. Now you can come join us in the free world that we've built. In 1983, I announced I would develop a completely free software operating system called GNU. In 1992, we had it almost finished, but one piece was missing, the kernel. Linus Torvalds in that year freed his kernel Linux, which filled the last gap and gave us the first complete system you could run on a PC, GNU plus Linux. So, unfortunately, having freedom at one point doesn't guarantee you'll keep it. There are over 1,000 different variants of GNU/Linux. They're called distributions. A few of them are entirely free software. Most of them have non-free software added because they're maintained by people who aren't concerned about freedom. They'd rather add convenience at the cost of freedom. So you have to check which is a free distro. To keep your freedom sometimes requires a sacrifice, sometimes a big sacrifice, as at Lexington. Sometimes, but in our campaign, they tend to be little sacrifices. Anybody with a little bit of maturity can make these sacrifices. For instance, you want applications, but some of them are non-free. If you want freedom, you got to do without them. So there may be some inconveniences you have to suffer for your freedom's sake. Then many websites send non-free programs written in JavaScript to the user's browser. If you don't want to run non-free programs, you should install Libre.js, which keeps out non-free JavaScript. And sometimes servers will offer to do your computing. They say, send us all your data, obviously for suckers. Then the server does the computing and sends you back the results. But you're not supposed to think about what's happening because it's a cloud and you don't see what's going on. Well, you should look. It's service as a software substitute, and it takes away control of your computing. So a large fraction of the world's web servers are running GNU/Linux and other free software. But I think the most important computers to put freedom in are your computers, not companies' web servers. They deserve freedom also. But above all, it's people that deserve freedom. So we need to advance. And to do that, we have to cross obstacles. One of them is there are big companies that make a lot of money by having control over users, and they don't want to let us advance. We have to overcome their opposition. Another is that the mainstream media don't talk about free software. They have a term that they use to bury these ethical issues. They say open source instead. Now, it talks about more or less the same programs, but with different ideas, where free software activists say, this is a matter of right and wrong. Users deserve freedom. We demand freedom. The people who say open source, they don't want to say that. So instead they say, let the users change the software and redistribute it, and they'll make the code better. They'll fix some bugs. It may be true, but it's a less important issue. If we want to keep our freedom, we've got to talk about freedom. So say free software, and you're helping us every time. Another obstacle is that lots of schools teach non-free software, which is basically like teaching the kids to smoke tobacco. It's implanting dependence, which is the opposite of what schools should do. A school should prepare citizens to live in a strong, capable, independent, cooperating, and free society, which means teaching free software in the school. But there's another reason to do that for education. Some kids want to become programmers. They're curious. They want to know how the programs work. Well, the one who's studying a free software can understand it. The one who's studying a non-free program can't learn anything because the knowledge in the non-free program is withheld, denied to the students. So to uphold the spirit of education, the school should make sure its programs are free. But there's an even more important reason. Schools should teach the spirit of goodwill, the habit of helping other people. So the class should say, if you bring a program to class, just as if you bring cookies to class, you've got to share it with everyone else. Can't keep it to yourself. You've got to share the source code so other people can learn. So don't bring any proprietary software to this class. The school has to set a good example by following its own rule. It should bring only free software to class, except as a reverse engineering exercise. Another obstacle is there's hardware we don't know how to write free software for because they won't tell us how to use the hardware. That's shocking. They want to sell you the product and they won't tell you how to use it. They say, here's a non-free program you can use, run it and shut up. Don't bother us. Well, how do we find out how to run that hardware? With reverse engineering, you've got to study all those zeros and ones to figure out what they really do and write down how to use that hardware so someone else can write the free program to do it. It's hard work, but it can be done. If you want to make a big technical contribution, that's what you should do. Each new activity of life can bring with it new human rights that are necessary. And the human rights depend on each other. If you lose one, it becomes harder to maintain the others. So nowadays, computing is so important in society that the freedoms of free software are among the human rights that society must establish and protect. Thus, how to help? Well, you can write free software. You can organize groups to campaign and persuade schools and governments to move to free software. You can help other people when they have trouble using free software or help them install it. You can say free software and spread the philosophical ideas. Moving to free software is the first step in the liberation of cyberspace. But of course, we also use the internet. We need other freedoms there, like network neutrality and putting an end to surveillance of people in general.
Right. So that's all about free software, not all about free software, right? So if it is a free software, there should be 4 freedoms: freedom 0, freedom 1, freedom 2, and freedom 3, right? And then we come here in this lesson, we are going to talk about number of terms. And the second term, we are going to talk about freeware. And freeware refers to the software that can use without recurring any costs, right? When I ask you what are free software, most of you have mentioned that free software are the software which does not have any cost. But now you know that free software means something else, and free software doesn't talk about cost at all, right? So freeware is the term which we think of the cost, and if that software doesn't incur any cost, that means it is a freeware, right? And freewares are usually shared without the source code. I think now you have a clear understanding about the source code, and when we are to talk about open source systems, we will talk about this as well. And also, some freewares can be shared with the source code as well, right? And when we talk about the freedom of these freewares, users have minimal freedom because they give that software without cost, right? And if you want to modify that program or redistribute those programs, then you will have to take the permission from the author. Some example of freewares are Adobe Reader, and Adobe Reader as well as Skype. There are more freewares. You can search what are those, right? And the other one is freemium or shareware, right? Freemium or shareware. And what this means is both are kind of freeware which market with the intention of encouraging users to buy more capable versions, because those who produce freemium or shareware, they have another version of the same software which is provided with additional cost, right? For an example, freemium offers at no cost. When we talk about freemium, you can freely download, but if you want more features which they have with their premium software, you will have to pay, right? You can download the software, but the software you're going to download will have a minimum set of features, and if you want to use the complete software, you will have to upgrade and you will need to pay for that options in freemium software. And shareware are also available without any initial cost, but the thing is, these sharewares are given free for a certain period. We were talking about freemium and shareware, and the difference between freemium and shareware is that, right? Freemium, for the premium software, you don't have to pay any cost at the beginning, but if you any cost at the beginning and all, you have no cost attached to freemium software, but if you need additional features, then you will have to pay for that. And when it comes to shareware, the software will be given for free for a certain time period, and thereafter you will have to pay for that, right? And then we comes to open source software. In open source software, what we see there is you can see the source code. Now, when I shared that video with you also, that also described what is a source code, right? You know that every program is written with a program code with help of a programming language, and here you see a sample program in this place. Let me, right? Here you see a sample program, and this is what we called as source code. And if you can see this source code in a software, then we say it is open source. You can look inside how it is developed, right? And when we talk about the binary code, there are two terms, source code and binary code. Binary code is the one which is actually executes inside your machine, right? This is the code that you write using high-level programming language, and it is converted into a binary version, which is actually run in your computer, right? So in an open source software, this source code is visible to the users. Right? And free software, we talk about free software, and there are 4 freedoms attached to free software. And in open source software, it can be said free, but when it comes to open source, the providers who provide this software add certain features to enhance its quality, and sometimes some of these open source software may not be free of charge. I'm not talking about free. It is sometimes it will not be free of charge because of that enhancement of quality, right? So this is very close to free software, but it is usually not identical to free software because usually open source softwares provide copyright licensing, right? That means if you want to modify their code, you can modify their code under a given license, right? Based on the conditions given in that license, you can modify the source code and redistribute. And they allow you to redistribute software based on the that agreement, right? Then agreement, you will have to do these things. And why they allow you to modify the software is because the purpose of modifying is to eliminate any of the bugs already existing there and to improve the quality of the software. And again, this is what I already talked about. Open source software can either be free of charge or chargeable, right? Okay. And the other thing you want to know is open source versus closed source. Open source means you can see the source code, and closed source means you can't see the source code. And that is the main difference. And if you have the source code, it is really flexible because you can change it and develop your own version of that software. And the other thing, if on the other hand, if it is not open source, then you can't do any changes to the existing software. And usually when open source softwares are provided, it is usually maintained by your user community, and in closed source software, it is usually maintained by a product team, right? So here there are a set of online users gathered together, and they discuss about what kind of modifications modifications can be done, what are the bugs in there, and they maintain the product. And here in closed source one, they have a special or dedicated team to maintain the product, right? So what how it affects the quality of software is here. When you think of the support, here you will have to take the support from online community. But since the closed software is based on the price, they sometimes will provide better support than open source systems, right? Because they work for the price, they work for the cost. Therefore, uh, you will have to pay what you want to download or what you want to buy. Then, on the other hand, at the same time, they will give you a good service with help of their dedicated team, right? So that's why here we see low level of support compared to closed source software. And here, because of their they have a price attached to their software, they provide excellent ongoing service and support, right? And low usability, this is even we can say low, even if it mentions low usability, it depends on the versions and I mean the distributions you are using here. And because every time many will change existing versions, and frequent versions may be there in open source systems, but in closed source, when they produce a version, they often produce a stable version, right? Okay. So these are some closed source and open source softwares we have. Um, if you see this site, there are a number of closed source softwares, including Windows. And here in this side, you see number of open source software, including Linux. Right? I'm not going to talk about all these softwares. You can search and see what are the open source software and what are the closed source software. And when you look at these icons, also you can identify what these are. Right? Okay. And free and open source software, now you know about free, about the term free, and you know about the term open source. So free, if it is free, it should satisfy for freedoms, and if it is open source, it should provide you the source code, right? So free and open source software has the freedom to run the program for any purpose, and it has freedom to study and modify the program, and it has freedom to copy the program, and freedom to improve the program and release to the public. So these four belongs to the belongs to free software, and also in addition, free and open source software will provide you the source code as well, right? ෆ්‍රී සොෆ්ටයා කියලා කියනකොට අපි දැන් ඊළඟට අර බිස්නස් මොඩල් එකට යන්න කලින් මේක පොඩ්ඩක් ක්ලියර් කරගෙන ඉමු. ෆ්‍රී සොෆ්ටයා කියලා කිව්වම ඔයගලන්ට ෆ්‍රීඩම් 4 එතන සඳහන් කරලා තියෙන ෆ්‍රීඩම් 4 සැටිස්ෆයි වෙන්න ඕනේ. එහෙම සොෆ්ට්වෙයාර් එකකට තමයි අපි ෆ්‍රී සොෆ්ට්වෙයාර් එකක් කියලා කියන්නේ. ඒක මතක තියාගන්න. ඒකට සැටිස්ෆයි වෙන්න ඕන ෆ්‍රීඩම් 4 තමයි මේ බෝල්ඩ් කරලා තියෙන්නේ. හරි. එතට 4 essential freedoms කියලා අපි කියනවා. freedom 0 ඉඳලා 3 වෙනකම් කියලා තමයි නම් කරලා තියෙන්නේ. එතට run කරන්න freedom එක, ඉගෙන ගන්න සහ වෙනස් කරන්න freedom එක, ඊළඟට copy එකක් අරගෙන copy එක අනික් අය අතරේ බෙදා හරින්න පුළුවන් freedom එක, සහ copy එකක් අරගෙන ඊට පස්සේ ඒක modify කරපු එකත් බෙදා හරින්න පුළුවන් වෙනකොට අපි කියනවා ඒක free software එකක් කියලා. අතට මතක තියාගන්න ඕන දෙයක් තමයි මේකෙදි කොහොමදවත් cost එකක් add වෙන්නේ නැහැ. හරි, cost එක ගැන අපි කතා කරන්නේ නැහැ. මේ free කියන term එක තිබුණාට. හරි. ඊළඟට freeware කියලා කිව්වම මෙතනදි තමයි අර cost කතන්දරේ එන්නේ, කතා වෙන්නේ. cost එකක් ගැන කතා කරන්නේ මේකෙදි. ඒතර freeware වලදී cost එකක් නැතුව තියෙන software වලට අපි කියනවා free software කියලා. ගොඩක් වෙලාවට free software ඔයගලන්ට source code එක නැතුව තමයි හම්බෙන්නේ. හැබැයි source code එකත් එක්ක share කරන freeware තියෙනවා. හරි. එතකොට freedom එක ගත්තම මේකේ ඒ කියන්නේ freeware වල තියෙන freedom එක අඩුයි. freedoms 4ක් ගැන අපි කතා කරන්නේ. source code එක බලන්න, වෙනස් download run කරන්න, ඊළඟට වෙනස් කරන්න, බෙදා හරින්න. එතට ඇත්තටම freeware වල තියෙන්නේ ඔයගලන්ට run කරන්න විතරක් වගේ තමයි තියෙන්නේ freeware වල. ඒකට minimum freedom එකක් තමයි freeware කියන software වර්ගයේ තියෙන්නේ. ඒත් ඔයාලට search කරලා බලන්න පුළුවන් මොනවද free ඔයගලන්ට ගන්න පුළුවන් software freeware විදිහට කියලා. හරි. මෙතන උදාහරණ දෙකක් දීලා තියෙනවා. Adobe Reader සහ Skype. ඒත් ඔයගලන් මේ software දෙක බලුවත් ඔයගලන්ට ඒක modify කරන්න chance එකක් දීලා නැහැ. source code එක ඔයගලන්ට පේන්නේ නැහැ නේද? ඒක නිසා freeware විදිහට තමයි සැලකෙන්නේ. ඊළඟට තව තියෙනවා premium සහ shareware කියලා. ඒක දෙකක් එකම කැටගරි එක ටිකක් එක විදිහට වැඩ කරන කියන්නේ එක හා ටිකක් තරමක් දුරට සමානයි. මේ දෙකම කියන්නේ premium software හා shareware දෙකම ඔයගලන්ට cost එකක් නැතුව ගන්න පුළුවන්. cost එකක් නැහැ. එතකොට premium කියලා කිව්වම premium software එක ඔයගලන්ට අර freeware වගේ සාමාන්‍යයෙන් පාවිච්චි කරන් යන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි මේ premium එක නෙවෙයි මේ software එක හදන ඕත කියලා කියමු. ඒ හදන ඕතගේ ඕන කියලා කියමු. හදන ඕනගේ ඔරිජිනල් ප්‍රොඩක්ට් එක. එතකොට හදන කෙනා කරන්නේ features අඩු කරලා cost එකක් ඇතුළත් කරන්නේ නැතුව ඔයගොල්ලන්ට software එකක් දෙනවා. එතකොට එහෙම කරාට පස්සේ ඒක තියෙන්නේ limited features ප්‍රමාණයක්. අඩු features ප්‍රමාණයක් තමයි ඒක තියෙන්නේ. හැබැයි ඔයගොල්ලන්ට ඉතුරු features ටිකක් ඒ සම්පූර්ණ full product එකේ නැත්නම් අපි කියන premium version එක කියලා. ඒතර premium එක ගන්න නම් ඔයගොල්ලන්ට ගෙවන්න සිද්ධ වෙනවා. හරි. ඊළඟට shareware කියන එක shareware කියලා කිව්වම ඒකත් එහෙමයි. ඔයගොල්ලන්ට cost එකක් නැතුව ගන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි sharewares ගොඩක් දුරට ගන්නකොට ඔයගොල්ලන්ට හම්බෙන්නේ පොඩි කාල සීමාවකට හම්බ වෙනවා ට්‍රයල් එකක් විදිහට. එන ට්‍රයල් කියලා ට්‍රයල් පීරියඩ් එකක් වලට හම්බ වෙනවා. ඒ ට්‍රයල් පීරියඩ් එකේ ඔයගොල්ලන්ට ඒක software එක පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන්. ට්‍රයල් එක ඉවරුණාට පස්සේ ඔයගොල්ලන්ට ගෙවන්න වෙන. ඒතර මේ දෙකේ වෙනස තමයි ප්‍රීමියම් එකේ ෆුල්ම software එක ඔයගොල්ලන්ට බලන්න ඔයගොල්ලන්ට වැඩ කරන්න හම්බ වෙන්නේ ප්‍රීමියම් වල. හැබැයි share එකේ ඔයගොල්ලන්ට සම්පූර්ණ software එක තමයි හම්බෙන්නේ ටික කාලයකට. ට්‍රයල් පීරියඩ් එකකට හම්බෙනවා share එකේ. ප්‍රීමියම් එකේ එහෙම නැහැ. ටිකක් වෙනස්. ඊළඟට source code එක මේක අර වීඩියෝ එකත් ඔයගලන්ට පැහැදිලි වෙන්න ඇති. ඒකෙත් කතා කරා. source code එක ඔයාලා කරලා තියෙන නිසා දන්නවා. source code එකයි අපි binary code එකයි කියලා දෙකක් කියනවා. ඒතර ඕනම program එකක් ඔයගොල්ලෝ download කරන software එකක් වුණත් ලියලා තියෙන්නේ මොකක් හරි program language එකක් පාවිච්චි කරලා. ඒතර ඒකේ ඒක ලියලා තියෙන language එකේ ලියලා තියෙන instructions ඔයාලට බලන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්න පුළුවන් බැරි වෙන්න පුළුවන්. open source ඒවාගේ තියෙන විශේෂත්වය තමයි ඒ ලියලා තියෙන instructions බලන්න පුළුවන්. instruction එක දන්නවා නම් ඔයාලට වෙනස් කරන්න පුළුවන්. මෙතන තියෙන මේ program එක දැක්කම ඔයගලන්ට මේ hello world කියන එක වෙනුවට වෙන නමක් දැම්මොත් ඒක print වෙනවා කියන එක ඔයාලට තේරෙනවනේ. ඒ වගේ තමයි source code එක පේනවා නම් හදලා තියෙන්නේ කොහොමද කියලා පේනවා නම් අපිට පුළුවන් තැන් වෙනස් කරලා අපිට වෙනස් විදිහකට software එක හදාගන්න පුළුවන්. ඊළඟට binary code කියලා අපි කියන්නේ ඒකම machine එකේ run වෙනකොට අපි convert කරන code එකට. හරි. එතකොට open source software ගැන කතා කරනකොට මේක අර free software කියන එකට ගොඩාම කිට්ටුයි. හැබැයි ඒකම නෙවෙයි. දැන් free software වලදී අපි කිව්වා freedom 4ක් තියෙනවා. ඒ freedom 4 satisfy කරන්න ඕනේ කියලා. open source software වලත් ඔය freedom 4 තියෙනවා. හැබැයි open source software වල cost එකක් ගැන කතා කරන්න පුළුවන්. හරි. එතකොට දැන් සමහර open source කියන එක තියෙනවා. එතකොට ඒක free අර freedom 4ත් satisfy වෙනවා. ඊට අමතරව ඔයගලන්ට එකට cost එකක් කියන්නේ එක open source software එක පාවිච්චි කරන එක open source software එක අනුව ඔයගලන්ට අර තියෙන options වල quality එක වෙනස්. හරි. ඒකයි ඒගොල්ලෝ cost එකක් add කරලා තියෙන්නේ. හරි. එතකොට open source software කිව්වට open source software කියන්නේ free software කියන එක නෙවෙයි. ඒක පොඩ්ඩක් මතක තියාගන්න. පොඩ්ඩක් නෙවෙයි හොඳටම මතක තියාගන්න. මට විනාඩියක් දෙන්න. හරි. එතකොට open source කියන්නේ free කියන එක නෙවෙයි. අපි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් කතාවට කියමු ඒක open source කිව්වම ඒ code එක පේනවා කියන එක තමයි ප්‍රධාන අදහස. එමෙ නැතුව cost එකක් නැහැ කියන එක නෙවෙයි. ඒක මතක තියාගන්න. හරි. ඊළඟට open source closed source කියන්නේ ඔයගොල්ලෝ proprietary software ගොඩක් ඒ proprietary software වල ගොඩක් වෙලාවට ඔයගොල්ලන්ට code එක බලන්න බෑ. ඒකට එක්සැම්පල් කියන්නේ closed source කියලා. ඒ දෙකේ වෙනස ගත්තම open source එකේ source code එක පේන්න තියෙනවා. closed source එකේ source code එක පේන්නේ නැහැ. ඊළඟට flexible කියලා කියන අපි open source එක මොකද ඔයගොල්ලන්ට වෙනස් කරන්න පුළුවන්. closed source එකේ source code එක share කරලා නැහැ. ඒක නිසා ඔයගලන්ට වෙනස් කරන්න බෑ. ඊළඟට online community එකකින් තමයි maintain කරන්නේ. ඔයාලගේ open source software සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ඒතකොට closed source software ගත්තම ඒකට maintain කරන්න වෙනම team එකක් ඉන්නවා. ඒතර ඒ හේතුව නිසා ගොඩක් දුරට open source software වලදී අපිට user කෙනෙක් විදියට හම් වෙන support එක ටිකක් මදි කියලා කියන්න පුළුවන් closed source software වලට සාපේක්ෂව. මොකද closed source software වලදී අපිට අපි ගෙවලා ගන්න එපයි closed source software. ඒක නිසා ඒගොල්ලෝ ඒ payment එක හේතු කරගෙන අනික් අතට අපිට හොඳ සර්විස් එකක් හොඳ සපෝට් එකක් ලබා දෙන්න කටයුතු කරනවා. හැබැයි ඔන්ලයින් කමියුනිටි එකට අපිට උදව් කරනවා තමයි. හැබැයි අර ක්ලෝස්ඩ් සෝස් කියන්නේ අපි ගෙවලා ගන්න software එකකදී අපිට හම්බෙන උදව්ව තරම් ඒ සපෝට් එක තරම් සපෝට් එකක් ටිකක් ගන්න ටිකක් අමාරුයි ඔන්ලයින් කමියුනිටි එකකින්. හැබැයි අපි මොන හරි ඩවුට් එකක් අහලා එහෙම දැම්මොත් ඒ කමියුනිටි එකේ එතන තියෙන ෆෝරම්ස් වල අපිට විසඳුමක් හොයාගන්න බැරි නැහැ. සාපේක්ෂව සපෝට් එක අඩුයි. ළඟට low usability high usability කියලා කියන්නේ ඇත්තටම open source software modify කරනවා ගොඩක් අය. ඇත්තට modify කරලා redistribute කරනවා තම තමන්ගේ copies විදිහට සමහරලාට අර ලොකු team එකක් එක්ක කරන්න නැති නිසා කියන්නේ commercial value එකක් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ නෙවෙයි ඒගොල්ලෝ කරන්නේ. ඒක නිසා සමහර වෙලාවට අර usability ඒවා ගැන ටිකක් හිතන අඩු වෙන්න පුළුවන්. closed source එහෙම නැත්නම් proprietary software වලට සාපේක්ෂව proprietary software ගත්තම ඒගොල්ලෝ ඒ සල්ලි දීලා මිනිස්සු ගෙවලා ගන්න ඕන නිසා ඒකට හරියන්නේ ඒ quality එක හදනවා. ඒකයි මෙතන low usability සහ high usability කියලා කියන්නේ. ඊළඟ image එකේ ඔයගලන්ට පේනවා කීපයක් තියෙනවා. closed source සහ open source software මේක icon තියෙන්නේ මේ පැත්තේ ඉන්නවා Windows closed source එකේ ඊළඟට open source side එකේ ඉන්නවා Linux Firefox Chrome ඒගොල්ලෝ ඉන්නවා හරි ඒත් ඔයගොල්ලන්ට search කරලා බලන්න පුළුවන් මොනවද closed source සහ open source software කියලා කියන්නේ කියලා right එතකොට අන්තිම ටර්ම් එක අපි කතා කරේ free and open source systems කියන එක. ඒතර free and open source systems ගත්තම free කියන එකක් තියෙනවා open source කියන එකක් තියෙනවා. ඒකට අර free softwares වල තියෙන freedom හතරම මේකට ඇතුළත්. ඒ වගේම තමයි source එක open. හරි. ඒතර අපි කතා කරපු දේවල් ඔයගලන්ට මතක ඇති. free software, freeware, shareware ඊට පස්සේ open source software අන්තිමට අපි free and open source software වලට right now we are to discuss about FOSS business model this is the version that we are going this is what we are talking about free and open source software with costs right here when we talk about open source software, I told you that open source software does not guarantee that it has no cost, right? Sometimes it can include some cost. And here we are going to talk about how it attaches costs, right? And first business model is for these people, companies, those business centered on development open source software, right? So what these people do is they have their own business based on the development of open source software, right? They have their own business. What they do as a business is they take open source software. That means there are a number of open source software. Open source means source code can be seen, right? So they develop those software and they are trying to earn money through that. And why they do that is they want to make money providing software that is by definition licensed free of charge, right? එතකොට මේක license ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ license එකේ තියෙනවා conditions වගේ. There are certain conditions in their license and if you agree to that license then you get you can have that software, right? How they earn money through that is they sell free and open source systems for low cost and they will provide extensions, so they will provide plugins and through those plugins and add-ons they earn money, right? And also sometimes the software may be free, but if you want additional training or support then you will have to pay. And there are certain types of free and open source systems like this: total free version and another version for money, right? So if you are an individual user, and you can use totally free version, and if you are a company, then you are not allowed to use that total free version. Then you have another version, enterprise version, uh, which you can have by paying the company, right? And also they provide donation. They ask donations for their developers when you are to download those software, right? So this is how free and open source systems can be used for this business model, right? So they earn money by developing open source software, and they have a number of licensing schemes. Sometimes they may sell software for low cost, and sometimes they will provide you additional extensions, and for those extensions you will have to pay. And sometimes they will provide the software freely, but they will charge for their training and support. On the other hand, they can provide you two different versions, what we call as dual licensing. And free version is usually for individual users, and if you are a company, then you will have to pay for that enterprise version. And also sometimes they will provide you the software freely, but they may ask donations from you for their developers. හරි. මේ ටික සිංහලෙන් කියන්න ඕනද නෑ නේද? මම හිමීට කිව්වේ ටිකක්. FOSS business model එක පොඩ්ඩක්. හරි. අපි දැන් කලින් කතා කරානේ කලින් කතා කරේ මෙතනට එනකම් free and open source software වලදී free and open source software වලට එන්න කලින් එක එක තියෙන software වර්ග ගැන. ඊළඟට මේ free and open source software කියලා කියවම අපි කිව්වා free කියන අදහසක් තියෙනවා, open source free software කියන අදහසක් තියෙනවා, open source software කියන අදහසක් තියෙනවා කියලා. හරි. එතකොට කොහොමද මේක බිස්නස් එකක් බවට පත් කරගන්නේ කියන කතාව තමයි තියෙන්නේ FOSS business model එකේ. ඒතර FOSS business model එක කා වෙනුවෙන්ද මේක තියෙන්නේ කියන එක මේ කියන්නේ. ඒතර මේ බිස්නස් එකක් කරගෙන තියෙන්නේ companies open source software develop කරන ඒගොල්ලෝ open source software අරගෙන modify කරලා versions හදලා එහෙම කරන අය තමයි මෙතනට අදාළ වෙන්නේ. ඇයි මෙහෙම කරන්නේ? ඒගොල්ලන්ට ඕනේ මුදල් උපයන්න යාලා මේ හදන free and open source software පාවිච්චි කරලා දැන් source code එකක් දෙනවා. හදලා තියෙන විදිහත් පෙන්වනවා. දැන් ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ sample project එකක් කියන්නේ. ඔයාලා හදනවා soft project එකක්. ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ final හරි individual හරි project එක කියලා හිතන්න. එතකොට ඒකේ code එක මට දෙනවා. මට හරි යාළුවෙක් හරි කාට හරි දෙනවා. code එක සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම දුන්නම එයාට ඒක පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන් කරදරයක් නැතුව. මේක ඇවිල්ලා free and open source software. free කියන්නේ එයාට කරදරයක් නැතුව run කරගන්න පුළුවන්, වෙනස් කරන්න පුළුවන් නේද? එතකොට code එකක් තියෙනවා. එතකොට එහෙම වුණාම සල්ලි හොයන්න පුළුවන්ද ඒකෙන්? ඔයාගේ code එක ඔයා හදපු project එකේ code එක සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම යාළුවෙක් දුන්නම කොහොමද යාළුවා ඒක business එකක් කරගන්න හදන්නේ? වගේ අදහසක් තමයි මෙතන තියෙන්නේ. හරි. එතකොට ඒක කරන්නේ මෙමය ගොඩක් කලාවට අඩු cost එකකට විකුණනවා මෙන්න මේ විදිහට. එයාලා කරනවා software එක තියෙනවා free. ඔයා හදපු project එක තියෙනවා. ඒකට අලුතෙන් කෑලි add කරනවා. extensions කියලා අපි කියන්නේ. extensions plugins add-ons ඒවා තමයි extensions add කරලා එතකොට ඔයා හදපු product එකමයි. හැබැයි additional features තියෙනවා. ඔයා හදපු product එක කිසි ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. ඒක පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන් ඕන කෙනෙක්ට. එතකොට අර additional add කරපු features වලට ඔයාට ගෙවන්න සිද්ධ වෙනවා. හරි. ඊළඟට දැන් ඔයාගේ ප්‍රොඩක්ට් එකම තව කවුරු ගන්නවා. ඒක අරගත්තට පස්සේ එයාට පුළුවන් මේ ප්‍රොඩක්ට් එක තව කෙනෙක්ට දෙන්න පාවිච්චි කරන්න කියලා. ඒත් එක්කම කියන්න පුළුවන් ඒ දෙන කෙනාට හිතා ගන්න බැයි නම් කොහොමද මේක පාවිච්චි කරන්න කියලා. මම ඔයාට ට්‍රේනින් එකක් දෙන්නම්. මේ හැබැයි ඒවා මට ඒක කරන මම ඔයාව ට්‍රේන් කරනකොට ඔයා මට ගෙවන්න ඕනේ කියන කතාව කියනවා. එතකොට එහෙම වුණාම එතනින් තව මුදල් ප්‍රමාණයක් උපය ගන්න පුළුවන්. හරි. ඊට පස්සේ සමහර වෙලාවට තියෙනවා versions දෙකක් හදලා ඉන්ඩිවිජුවල් යූසර්ස්ලාට කියලා. එතකොට ඒක වෙනසක් කියන්නේ ඉන්ඩිවිජුවල් යූසර්ස්ලාට හදන එක අර වගේම software එක තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි තව version එකක් තියෙනවා companies වලට කියලා හදනවා. ඒක ටිකක් අර ඉන්ඩිවිජුවල් යූසර්ස්ලාට තියෙන version එකට වඩා ටිකක් වෙනස් විදිහට හොඳ විදිහකට quality එක increase කරපු version එකක් තියෙන්න පුළුවන් companies වලට විතරක් දෙන්න. එතකොට ඉන්ඩිවිජුවල් යූසර්ස්ලාට දෙන එකට මොකක්වත් අය කරන්නේ නැහැ. හැබැයි companies වලට බෙදා හරින එකට අය කරනවා. ඊළඟට සමහර ලාවට software එකම දෙනවා. ඒත් එක්කම donations දෙන්න කියලා ඉල්ලීමක් කරනවා. ඒ software product එක කරපු අයට. දැන් අපි ඔයගොල්ලෝ වගේ නම් සමහර ලාවට හැමෝම ඉතින් මේ donations නොදී software එක download කරගන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි සමහර අය donation එකකුත් දීලා software එක download කරගන්න අය ඉන්නවා. එතකොට ඒක නිසා තමයි එහෙම donations බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනුත් software development කරන්නේ. එතකොට software licensing ගැන කතා කරා මේ FOSS business model එක එනකොට. එතකොට මේගොල්ලෝ software එක develop කරනකොට ඒගොල්ලෝ licensing schemes යටතේ develop කරනවා. එක licensing schemes වල තියෙන licensing schemes වලදී තියෙන දේවල් තියෙනවා. ඔයගොල්ලෝ මොන වගේ conditions වලට යටත්ද කියන එක තියෙනවා. තමයි මේ තියෙන්නේ. එතකොට මේ license වර්ග කීපයක් තියෙනවා. public domain, permissive, LGPL, copyleft, proprietary කියන එක. හරි. එතකොට එක licensing schemes අනුව ඔයාලට තියෙන නිදහස ඔයගලන්ට කරන්න පුළුවන් දේවල් වෙනස්. හරි. ඒ ටික ගැන තමයි ඊළඟට කතා කරන්න හදන්නේ. බ්‍රේක් එකක් අරගෙන ආවිල්ලා කතා කරමු. හරි.